Translating value, Oregon. Among husband films the cash result of that day's mushrooms on his wife's hands. In the buying tent, mushrooms and the cash they bring are trophies of freedom. Only later sorting disentangles them as capitalist commodities. From gifts to commodities and back. It is time to return to the problem of alienation and capitalist logic of commodifications. Things are torn from their life worlds to become objects of exchange. This is the process I am calling alienation, and I use the term as a potential attribute of non-humans as well as humans. The surprising thing about the search for Matsutake in Oregon is that it does not involve alienation in the relation between foragers and mushrooms. The mushrooms are indeed torn from their fungal bodies, although as fruit this is their goal, but instead of becoming alienated commodities, ready for conversions between money and capital, they become trophies of the hunt, even as they are sold. Foragers beam with pride while showing off their mushrooms. They can't stop narrating the pleasures and dangers of the search. The mushrooms become part of the foragers, just as if they had eaten them. This means that somehow these trophies must be converted to commodities. If mushrooms are gathered as trophies of freedom and become part of the pickers in that process, then how do they become capitalist commodities? My approach to this question is guided by an anthropological legacy of attention to the special qualities of gifts as a form of social exchange. This attention was catalyzed by the exchange of necklaces and arm shells made by the Melanesians east of New Guinea, described by Bronislaw Malinowski as the Kula ring. 1. Bronislaw Malinowski, Argonauts of the Western Pacific, London Routledge, 1922. For generations of social analysts, Kula exchange has inspired thoughts about the varied ways value is created. The amazing thing about these ornaments is that they are not particularly useful, nor tokens of general exchange, nor interesting in themselves. They have value only because of their role in Kula. As gifts, they make relations and reputations. That is their value. This kind of value upsets economic common sense, and that is why it's good to think with. Indeed, thinking through Kula has made it possible to identify alienation as a puzzling and extraordinary feature of capitalism. Kula reminds us that things as well as people are alienated under capitalism, just as in factory workers are alienated from the things they make. Allowing those things to be sold without reference to their makers, so too things are alienated from the people who make and exchange them. Things become standalone objects to be used or exchanged. They bear no relation to the personal networks in which they are made and deployed. 2. My ability to think about objects, alienated and otherwise, draws on Marilyn Strather in The Gender of the Gift, Berkeley University of California Press, 1990. Amelia Henner, Martin Hollebrod, and Sarah Watts editions, Thinking Through Things, London Routledge, 2006, and David Graeber, Towards an Anthropological Theory of Value, London, Palgrave Macmillan, 2001. And while this situation may seem ordinary to those of us inside capitalist worlds, studying Kula makes it seem strange. In Kula, things and persons are formed together in gifts, through which things are extensions of persons and persons are extensions of things. Kula valuables are known through the personal relations they make. People of note, in turn, are known through their Kula gifts. Things, then, do not just have value in use and commodity exchange. They may have value through the social relationships and reputations of which they are a part. 3. Capitalist commodities, unlike Kula objects, cannot carry the weight of entanglement, histories, and obligations. It is not simply exchange that defines capitalist commodities. Alienation is required. The difference between value-making in Kula and capitalism seems so striking that some analysts argue that we might divide the world into gift economies and commodity economies, each with a separate logic for making value. 4. Marilyn Strather paraphrases Christopher Gregory. If in a commodity economy things and persons assume the social forms of things, then in a gift economy they assume the social forms of persons. Strather and Gender, 134, citing Christopher Gregory, Gifts and Commodities. Waltham, Massachusetts, Academic Press, 1982, page 40. Like most dichotomies, the contrast between gift and commodity suffers when it hits the ground. Most situations juxtapose and confuse these ideal types or stretch outside them. Yet, even in its own oversimplifications, it is a useful tool because it urges us to look for a difference. Rather than relax into economic common sense, we stay alert for contrasts across value regimens. To explore how capitalism draws from non-capitalist value systems and how these fare within capitalism, a tool for noticing differences worth trying out. The gift versus commodity distinction can stand in for the absence or presence of alienation, the quality necessary to turn things into capital assets. In considering the Matsutake commodity chain, the attraction of this tool increases too, in attending to the final destination of Matsutake. Matsutake in Japan is almost always a gift. The lowest kinds of Matsutake are sold at supermarkets and used as ingredients in food manufacturing, but the better kinds, through which the product is known, are quintessential gifts. Almost no one buys a fine Matsutake just to eat. Matsutake build relationships, and as gifts they cannot be separated from these relationships. Matsutake become extensions of the person, the definitional feature of value in a gift economy. Perhaps there have been times and places when the gift was direct from a picker to a consumer. When peasants gave their lords Matsutake in medieval Japan, for example, the mushrooms had only to be foraged and presented to express the relation-making force of the gift. Most of the time today, however, gifts are salvaged from capitalist commodity chains. Givers buy them in high-end grocery stores or take the guests whom they want to honor to fancy restaurants to eat them. Grocery stores and restaurants obtain them from a chain of wholesalers who, in turn, obtain them from importers or domestic agricultural cooperatives. How are gifts made from commodities, and might those commodities, in turn, have been made earlier along the chain from gifts? The rest of this chapter explores these puzzles which take us into the heart of these translations necessary for bringing capitalism and its constitutive others together. Let me begin in Japan with the arrival of Matsutake from abroad. Surely, those mushrooms so carefully cooled, packed, and sorted are a capitalist commodity. They are as close as we might get to alienated standalone objects, labeled only by the country of the exporter. No one could have any idea under what conditions they were foraged or sold. 5. Many Matsutake foraged in the U.S. Pacific Northwest are labeled as Canadian because exporters send them from British Columbia. Exporters attach tags based on the location of the exporting airport. Japanese law forbids foreign food products from being labeled by region, a privilege saved for Japanese products. Only national origins are allowed. They have no connections to the people who earlier admired and exchanged them. They are inventory, assets from which importers build their firms. But almost immediately on arrival, they begin their transformation from commodities to gifts. This is the magic of translation, and dealers at every link on the Japanese end of the commodity chain are experts at it. It is worth following them. Importers have incoming shipments of Matsutake sent directly to government licensed wholesalers, who are paid a commission to supervise further sales. Wholesalers guide imported Matsutake down one of two paths. They are sold either by negotiation or by auction to intermediate wholesalers. In both cases, rather to my surprise, wholesalers do not see their jobs as merely the efficient transfer of goods down the commodity chain. They are active mediators. They see their jobs as matching the Matsutake with the very best buyers for that match. One man who managed Matsutake at a wholesale house explained, "I never sleep during Matsutake season. Whenever a shipment comes in, he must assess it. When he has made a good judgment about the quality and special characteristics of the lot, he calls the right buyers, the ones who could use just that kind of Matsutake. He has already given the mushrooms relation-making powers, the powers of quality." After several interviews in which we heard experiences of this kind, my collaborator Shiho Satsuka explained the role of wholesalers as matchmakers. Their job is to match goods with appropriate buyers, getting the best possible prices through the match. One vegetable wholesaler spoke of how he goes to visit farmers to see the conditions under which they grow their crops. He wants to know just which buyers these crops will satisfy. Translation from commodity to gift is already happening and making the match. The wholesalers look for relation qualities in his goods, which in turn make them a natural match with particular buyers. From the first, then, the sale of matsutake is wrapped up with the making and maintaining of personal relationships. The mushrooms take on relational qualities. They are given the power to make personal ties. Intermediate wholesalers who buy matsutake at auctions are even more invested in making matches. Unlike wholesalers who make a commission on sales, they make nothing if they do not find the right match. When they buy, they are often already thinking of a particular client. Their skill, too, is the assessment of quality, as this forges relationships. The exceptions here are agents who work with supermarkets, who are more concerned with quality and reliability than quality, or with quantity and reliability than quality. Supermarkets buy lower value matsutake, but buying matsutake are the preserves of small retail businesses who buy from intermediate wholesalers, and the relations flavor the whole trade. The ability to properly assess the mushrooms is a necessary ingredient of this flavor. It allows sellers to extend personal advice, not just a generic commodity to buyers. The advice is that the gift that comes with the mushroom is stretching it beyond use or exchange value. The best matsutake are sold in specialty grocery stores and expensive restaurants, which pride themselves on knowing their clientele. One grocer explains that he knows his best clients well. He knows when a ceremony that could use matsutake, such as a wedding, is coming up. When he buys from the intermediate wholesaler, he too is already thinking about particular clients. He contacts these clients, maintaining a relationship, not just selling a product. There is a gift in the matsutake even before it leaves the commodity sphere. Individuals who buy matsutake are almost always thinking about building relationships. 6. Matsutake are not the only fine foods used in this way. Especially melons and salmon are among the goods that enter this gift economy and, like matsutake, mark seasonality. Such gifts are commonly referred as confirming Japanese ways of life. Their status as gifts drive rankings and prices. A colleague told me about writing with an anxious group to a celebration that was supposed to heal an old rift in an extended family. Will they bring out the matsutake? His friends kept asking. If the rift would be healed, there would be matsutake. There was. Thus, too, matsutake is an ideal gift to give someone with whom one needs a long-term relationship. Suppliers gave matsutake to the firms that gave them business. One grocer commented that religious converts had begun to purchase matsutake for presentation to their spiritual leaders. Matsutake signals a serious commitment. The grocer told me, too, that he thinks this is the key to Japanese ways of life. You can understand France without knowing about truffles, he quipped, but you can't understand Japan without knowing matsutake. He was referring to the relational quality of the mushroom. It wasn't just the smell or the taste, but the ability of the mushroom to build personal ties that made it so powerful. This is where his work as a matchmaker comes in too. He must make matsutake relational long before they are ready to be eaten. It is the mushroom's relational force as well that evokes its opposite, wild fantasies of stuffing oneself with matsutake, far beyond satiation. Several people told me mischievously of such fantasies, knowing they were impossible. It was not just the price of matsutake, but the frisson of breaking matsutake cardinal rule. To build relationships, to stuff oneself with an endless pile would be so thoroughly and deliciously bad. The value of matsutake then derives not just from use and commercial exchange, it is made in the act of giving. And this is possible because mediators all along the chain are already giving the quality of matsutake to their clients as a personal gift. Perhaps this personalization is reminiscent of other aristocratic goods. In other places, the gentleman wants a suit made to fit him, not one off the rack. But this parallel makes the conversion between commodity and gift even more telling. Across many sectors and cultures, mediators are posed to convert capitalist commodities into other value forms. Such middlemen are engaged in the acts of value translation through which capitalism comes to cohabit with other ways of making people and things. But there is one set of relations that is never included with matsutake gifts in Japan, the relations of foraging and buying in other countries. Neither middlemen nor consumers concern themselves with the relations through which the matsutake are procured. Foreign matsutake are ranked according to a set of Japanese preferences that have nothing to do with the conditions under which the mushrooms grow and were foraged and marketed. When they arrived at an import warehouse, they have no connections to pickers and buyers, much less ecological life worlds. For a moment they are fully capitalist commodities. But how did they get that way? Herein lies another tale of value translation. Let me take you, one last time then, to the buying scene in open market ticket, to attend to the puzzle of alienation and its alternatives and value creation. I've been arguing that despite the diverse histories and agendas of participants, what hold them together is the spirit they call freedom. Various versions of freedom are exchanged in the buying, each augmenting the other. Pickers bring the trophies of their political freedom and their freedom in the woods to exchange with advocates of market freedom, and thus to gain more freedom to go back to the woods again. Might freedom, as much as mushrooms and money, be what makes value in the exchange? In the Melanesian cooler ring mentioned earlier, participants bring ordinary stuff, such as pigs and yams, to exchange alongside cooler valuables. These side trades gain value through their association with the fame-making exchange of necklaces and armbands. Similarly, in open ticket, mushrooms and money are as much tokens and trophies of an exchange of freedom as valuables in themselves. They gain value through their connection to freedom. They are not isolated objects to own, but person-making attributes. It is in this light that despite the fact that there are no explicit gifts here, if I had to judge this economy in a gift versus commodity contrast, I would place it on the side of gifts. Personal value and object values are made together in exchanges of freedom. Freedom as personal value is made through money and the search for mushrooms, just as the value of money and mushrooms is assessed by participants through freedom gained by buyers and searchers. Money and mushrooms have more than use value or capitalist exchange value. They are part of the freedom that pickers, buyers, and field agents treasure. Half a night later, however, the mushrooms and the money that surrounds them are something completely different. By the time the mushrooms are packed into crates with ice gel and are sitting on the tarmac for shipment to Japan, it would be hard to find a trace of the distinctive economy of freedom that produced them as trophies. What happened? Back in open ticket around 11 p.m., trucks take crated mushrooms to the warehouses of bulkers in Oregon, Washington, and Vancouver, British Columbia. There, something strange happens. The mushrooms are sorted again. This is particularly odd because buyers in open ticket are master sorters. Sorting creates the prowess of buyers. It is an expression of their deep connection with the mushrooms. Stranger yet, the new sorters are casual laborers with no interest in mushrooms at all. They are part-time, on-call workers without benefits, people who want a little extra income but have no full-time jobs. In Oregon, I saw back-to-the-lane hippies sorting under neon lights in the wee hours of the morning. In Vancouver, it was immigrant Hong Kong housewives. These are workers in the classic sense of the term, alienated labor without interest in the product, and yet they are translators, North American style. It is precisely because they have no knowledge or interest in how the mushrooms got there that they are able to purify them as inventory. The freedom that brought those mushrooms into the warehouse is erased in this new assessment exercise. Now the mushrooms are only goods, sorted by maturity and size. Why sort again? The warehouse sorting is orchestrated by bulkers, small businessmen willing to position themselves between exporters guided by Japanese economic conventions and buyers committed to a local American gift and trophy economy at war and freedom. They work through field agents who join the fray among the buyers. Between the field agents and the exporters, then, they must transform the mushrooms into an acceptable export commodity. They need to recognize what they are shipping and represent it to the exporters. Resorting helps them know the mushrooms. One detail illustrates, it is illegal to pick, buy, and export very small matsutake, known in Oregon as babies. The reason is that Japanese market is not interested, although U.S. authorities say conservation guides the regulation. 7. If all mushrooms are picked before their spores mature, there is no reason, in terms of the reproductive success of the fungus, to privilege babies. Matsutake foragers pick them anyway, and buyers claim that the pickers make them by small mushrooms. 8. Babies are conventionally sorted number 3 grade out of 5, although the mushroom hunters sometimes intervene to get a few into more expensive number 1 grade. Babies are removed in the warehouse extra sort. Because the mushrooms are small, I doubt if this makes much weight difference. U.S. authorities never check export crates for babies, but discarding babies helps bring the mushrooms into commodity standards. No longer entangled in the exchange of freedom between pickers and buyers, the mushrooms become commodities of a particular size and grade. 9. Buyers in the central cascade sort matsutake by maturity into 5 price grades. Bulkers resort by size. Exported mushrooms are packed by both size and maturity. They are ready for use or commercial exchange. Matsutake is a capitalist commodity that begins and ends its life as a gift. It spends only a few hours as a fully alienated commodity, the time when it waits as inventory in shipping crates on the tarmac and travels in the belly of the plane. But these are hours that count. Relations between exporters and importers, which dominate and structure the supply chain, are cemented within the possibility of these hours. As inventory, matsutake allow calculations that channel profits to exporters and importers, making the work of organizing the commodity chain worthwhile from their perspective. This is salvage accumulation, the creation of capitalist value from non-capitalist value regimes.